and possibility that I have had with me my entire life.
But you know, Senator, you, right after New Hampshire, you and I had a conversation a couple of days after that in which you described your moment in the setting where you said that you worked very hard and it was seen as a turning point by many people. You described that as a moment of grace.
Yes.
So that is a specific in...
Right, right. Well, you know, John, it is perhaps a reluctance on my part that is rooted in my personal reserve, rooted in the way I was raised, that I worry, and I understand you want to ask a lot of personal questions, and I appreciate that, but I also worry, as I suggested to you in that same interview, that you have to walk the walk of faith. And talking about it is important because it's important to share that experience. But I also believe that, you know, faith is just, it's grace, it's love, it's mystery, it's provocation. It is everything that makes life and its purpose meaningful as a human being. And those moments of grace are ones that I cherish. And, you know, and asked a specific question about how I felt when I shared my belief that politics is not a game. It is not a who's up, who's down. I mean, it is a serious search. And we are so fortunate because we have taken the gifts that God gave us and we have created this democracy where we choose our leaders. And we have to be more mindful of how important and serious a business this is. And therefore, when I say politics is not a game, it is really coming from deep within me because I know that we have the opportunity to really give other people a chance to live up to their own God-given potential. And that, to me, is the kind of grace note that makes politics worthwhile. Because believe me, there's a lot about it that is not particularly welcoming or easy. But every day as I travel around the country, I meet people whose faith just knocks me over. I mean, I was with a woman in Philadelphia Friday morning whose son was murdered on the streets in Philadelphia, whose grandson was murdered. And she and I just sat together and she told me about how strong her faith is and how it has sustained her and how she believes, you know, God is with her and she doesn't understand why this happened to her son and her grandson, but every day she's grateful and she is determined to be the person that she believes God meant her to be. And so when I sit there and I listen to that woman tell me about how it felt and how today she is still, you know, getting up every morning, has a smile on her face, looking to go to her daycare business and take care of all these children who've been entrusted to her, that's a moment of grace. But it's not about me. I mean, not every moment of grace is about you. More often, it is about the interaction and the relationship. You know, grace is that relationship with God, but it's also the relationships with our fellow human beings in which we know grace is present. And so I just feel very fortunate that, you know, I have been able to experience that, and I wish it for everyone.
Let's bring a question then from one of the religious leaders joining us tonight, Dr. Joel Hunter, who is senior pastor of the 12,000-member Northland Church in Longwood, Florida. Dr. Hunter.
How are you, Dr. Hunter? It's
I'm
good
doing
to see
fine,
you.
Senator. Thank you. Senator, many of the issues we're going to be talking about tonight, Darfur, AIDS, abortion, torture, could present you with choices that will have life and death consequences for countless people around the world. What are the first principles you fall back on to make such decisions? Are there certain activities or references or people with whom you consult in order to do what is morally right?
You know, Dr. Hunter, I think this is one of the challenges that face any of us who are in public life, where literally you do have the authority to make these decisions that could very well be life and death decisions. And they are daunting. And I do not pretend to know how I will deal with every single one of them. But I do have a sense of the process by which I will try to approach them. And it really is rooted in my prayer, my contemplation, my study. I think you have to immerse yourself in advice, information, criticism from others. I don't pretend to even believe that I know the answers to a lot of these questions. I don't. But I do believe that you have to be willing to expose yourself to many different points of view, and then you have to make that decision. I think that for a lot of us, decisions are ones that you don't just make and put on a shelf. To be fair, to be constantly struggling and challenging yourself, you have to keep opening up that decision and asking. And very often, as you know, some decisions look like they're 100 to nothing until you actually examine them. And some decisions truly are right down the middle, and you're not sure which side of the line you will decide upon. You mentioned some of the very difficult decisions that we are going to face, and there are countless more. How do we get out of Iraq the right way? Everyone knows there is no easy, comfortable decision. I believe we've got to begin taking our troops out of Iraq based on my analysis of what I think is the best path forward for us and for the Iraqis. But I am deeply aware that there will be predictable and unpredictable consequences. And part of making a decision is having to live with the consequences. And I have been very fortunate in my life to have people whom I feel very comfortable talking to openly, with total frankness, seeking their guidance. They don't all agree with me. They don't all share my view when I start the conversation, perhaps. But I don't think you can surround yourself only with people with whom you think you will agree. And for me, being amongst people who challenge me, who make me uncomfortable, to be very blunt, is an important part of my decision-making process. I want to push back. I want to argue. I want to raise other hypotheticals and throw them back to see what the outcome is. But at the end of the day, since we are running to be the President of the United States, you have to be comfortable making a decision, because you cannot say, well, let's put it on the back burner and then get back to it sometime when it's clearer for many of these decisions. And then you have to live with the consequences. But I hope I will never, ever find myself being defensive or abrupt and dismissive of people who disagree with me. I regret that that often happens in politics. And maybe it's because oftentimes the decision-making process is so exhausting. If you're a person of faith, after you've prayed, if you're a person willing to subject yourself to criticism after you've done it, you're just so relieved to make the decision you don't want to revisit it. But I don't think that a president can afford to do that.
Senator, do you believe personally that life begins at conception?